Greetings and welcome to Life Off Screen. I'm Dan Ruppel. I'm here with my wife, Peggy. And one of the joys of this show is that we get to talk to friends about their life off screen. And our guests today, Erik and Keri Close, they're dear friends, but they have some wonderful things.
It's a great interview.
Yes, that they do with their life off screen that I think you're just going to really, really enjoy. If you're not familiar with them, Erik is a very talented actor, writer, director. He, for many years, you might know him best from, he was on the hit show NASHVILLE. Prior to that, he was on Without a Trace, which that show earned him a Golden Globe nomination for, I think it was Best Ensemble Cast. He's been in so many different shows as an actor, but he also has directed many of the episodes in NASHVILLE as well as Without a Trace. But then he recently started directing shows that he was also in for the Hallmark Channel.
Yes.
So he's very accomplished, and I think you're going to enjoy what he has to say. And then tell us about his wonderful wife.
Well, I mean, they're just so sweet together, and how they work together has been remarkable. Keri is accomplished in her own right. She's got a master's from social work from USC, and but she brings so much to the table. She's talented in her own right because she is a singer. She also is a screenwriter. They've got projects they're working together. They've got a ministry that they pour their life into called the Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch. She'll love hearing about that. There's just a lot to this couple, a depth and a breadth and an intentionality about their marriage that is so refreshing in the insecure, challenging work of what an actor has to go through every day. Fascinating.
Yeah, you're gonna love it. They've been married 25 years, and they have two daughters who are both in college right now. So let's just jump right in. Erik and Keri, welcome.
Yes.
Welcome from Oregon.
Hey.
Good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. And Erik, you and I have talked numerous times the last few months, but Keri, I haven't seen you in a while. This is great. It's so good to see you.
Yes. Last time we had this scrumptious dinner.
Yeah.
You recommended a place. It was in LA. It was so much fun. And I think, Erik, the first time I met you, I can say that it was at the 30th anniversary of Master Media, right? They had a special event and kind of an inaugural time for Dan as the CEO coming in. And someone they placed you at our table next to us. And we just had this great time to just chat. And I was woefully ignorant of your IMDb. I had no idea, your career and the depth and breadth of it. So I felt a little foolish about that. But you were about as gracious as can be. I just remember you talking so fondly about your wife. And I remember telling Dan, I love this guy. He is just centered and loves his family. And so then I go home and I tell my sister, who's a detective, who I sat next to, and she's just like Diane, the FBI agent from Without a Trace, because she was like a major fan. So I got a great education into what you have done, and we just loved getting to know you ever since. So
yeah,
thank you. And I'm glad that God brought us together, and that we've developed this friendship. And despite distance, this is a miracle in itself that God gave people the wisdom to design Zoom and different technology that we can still communicate and be together.
Yeah,
best.
It's a joy. It's a joy. Well, let's go back to really the beginnings of your passions. I'll start with you, Erik. When did your passion for performing, acting, ultimately directing, when was that? When did that bug bite you?
Well, I think the first time I guess I was always a performer even when I was a kid, but I think in 6th grade I did a play. It was Robin Hood. We did a play about Robin Hood, and they created this character called David O. the Common, and I was this character. And I remember I just knew everybody's lines. I memorized the whole play, and I remember enjoying that experience. And then I didn't really get back on stage until junior high in a drama class. And I loved it. And I just enjoyed the performance aspect of it. I would be dishonest if I didn't say I liked the applause, after you go off stage and you hear the audience. That becomes less interesting as you get older. But and then I was living in Spain as a college student in my junior year of college, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for a living. And a friend of mine was going to go into film school at USC because we were both at USC. And the more we talked about movies and television and entertainment, it was then that I really was bit by the bug, because it was relatable now because of all the movies that had come out, Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and all these things that we loved. And it just suddenly, I realized why I love the movies so much and telling stories, and growing up in a family with, lots of stories that were passed around in our family. I just was like, yeah, I want to be a storyteller. And that's really when the passion really ignited, and I declared, my major, and then started taking film classes, and the rest is history from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being in USC, you're right there. You've got right in the hub and opportunities. And so, Keri, what about you? When did your faith journey, was it before you met, after you met? How did you meet? How'd you fall in love? That's a lot to answer.
Okay. That's a very big question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see. Well, we can start with my faith journey. I grew up in a Christian home. With parents who love the Lord and were involved in our Presbyterian church. Both were elders, Sunday school teachers, and it was just part of my daily life. I don't really remember a time where I didn't know Jesus, but it wasn't really probably until I was about 20 that I really had my coming to Jesus meeting and was like, you know what, Lord, I think my way isn't really the best way, so I think I want to do it your way. And it was and so I was about 20, and I was at TCU, Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. And the cool thing about being in the South during that time in the 80s is that you could be a college student and you could go out and do your thing on Friday and Saturday night, but everybody went to church on Sunday morning.
Yeah. Culturally. Yeah.
So, you made it to church. And one of the blessings in my life at that time was that my grandparents, my mother's parents lived, and also my father's mother lived in Fort Worth. And my grandparents would pick me up 2 Sundays a month and take me to church with them.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome.
So that was it was just a precious time for me to be able to do that with them. And then we met when I was a senior in college. And at that time I had decided to stop dating, really. I knew in my heart that that the man God had chosen for me was not at TCU, and that I was totally okay with that. Even with all my girlfriends getting engaged and whatnot, I was like, nope, that's not God's plans for me. But I met Erik at a wedding in Dallas, Texas, in March of 1992.
So Erik, you were already living out in LA.
Yeah, I was living in LA, and then Hollywood came to Texas, and then swept the local girl off her feet.
That's right.
Got it. Kind of a Doc Holliday thing.
I love it.
I was actually working on Santa Barbara on a soap opera. I was a series regular on Santa Barbara. I had been out of college for about 2 years at the time, maybe 3 actually. And it's a long story, but it was clearly the Lord who got me to that wedding, because I had canceled going to the wedding because of work. Something came up. And I had heard a sermon just that week at church, at Bible study or something. Our pastor said, he preached on that scripture, let your yeses be yeses and your noes be no. And on the day of that wedding, Saturday morning, I was in my apartment with my brothers. We had just moved in. We didn't have furniture. I was sleeping on the floor on a mattress, and it was going to my head, your yeses be yeses, your noes be no. And I said, I promised that guy I would be at his wedding. I have to be there. I woke my brothers up. They drove me to LAX. I jumped on an American Airlines flight. Literally, this was easy to go to the airport. They just parked at the curb, and we walked into the gate together and left our car at the curb right there at LAX, because it didn't matter back then. Yeah. I got on a flight, flew to Texas.
And gosh.
That day, the day of the wedding, and I met her at the wedding.
Yeah. Now, Keri,
that's amazing.
You're not void of a love and appreciation and passion for the arts. You're a terrific singer and you're involved in music, but you're master's degrees in social work. Mm-hmm. Now you're dating this Hollywood dude, and
surreal.
Was there some kind of checks? Like, I don't know how flaky an actor might be, or is this a different rhythm that I was thinking about for my future?
Well, I think for me, what he did was sort of fun and fascinating to me. you know, I had never been to California before, and I did watch soap operas though, so I was familiar with his show, but I watched a different soap opera in college, not his, but I was okay. I think in the beginning, it was just sort of his job, and it was fun that he got to be on television, but it wasn't ever something that I was interested in for myself. But it was exciting, I guess, and I would always be so excited when he was going to be on TV or something, and telling my friends and family, guess what, Erik's gonna be on TV, so tune in and watch. And it was just, in the beginning, it was just your job, essentially.
Yeah, and I think it was probably kind of exciting for you because it was something different. It
Totally
wasn't,
different.
you know, here's a guy from LA who's on TV as an actor, and I think a lot of her friends were kind of like, oh wow, it's a big deal. And but Keri, she kept me honest, she kept me humble, because she didn't like make too big of a deal about it, which was a funny story though. And without getting into too much detail, Keri and her friends used to make fun of a milk commercial that I was on for about 2 years. They used to make fun of it. They didn't know me. And so when Keri met me, she said to her friends that night when she went home, she said, I met the guy I'm going to marry the night of the wedding that we met. And she just knew the minute we met. And so she told her friends, well, the next morning, her friends called her and said, the commercial came on, and they're like, you're going to marry the milk guy. Like, they this guy for me for 2 years.
And making fun of my future husband.
It was just such God's sense of humor that,
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, Keri, I can relate, because, you know, right before Dan came into my life, I kind of had that conviction too. I said, you know, God, me and you, and I'm good. I really don't need a relationship. I went as far as to say this. I'm not saying I advocate it, but I remember really just praying. I said, God, the next guy that holds my hand, let it be my husband. I'm content until that day. Yeah. I had no idea it would be within months I would meet him. And he was actually a young believer. And I remember thinking, I've
been a Christian for 3 months when we met.
And I thought to myself, no, you know, there were so many things that were attractive about his character already, his thirst for things of God, just a passion, and integrous and some other things. But anyway, I remember saying, no, this guy needs a secure, undistracted devotion to God. I'm not going to mess that up. So really kind of was resistant. And he was becoming part of, you know, starting entertainment industry, and he had a comedy group and was touring around. Similar people were thinking, wow, that's so cool what he does. But
except your dad. It was so funny. I wanted to ask her to marry me, but I wanted to get her dad's permission prior to asking her. Mm-hmm. And and her dad was very doing his proper due diligence. Mm-hmm. But I go and say, I'd like to marry your daughter. And then he says, Dan, what do you do for a living?
I mean, he knew, but he
knew,
really
but he didn't have a handle on it. And he goes, I said, I'm a comedian. I do comedy. And he paused, and then he said, but what do you do for a living? And I said, well, that's what I do. I have a comedy group. We get up on stage and we perform. And he still didn't figure it out. So he goes, listen, I'm an electrician. I fix wiring, power, electricity. And you... I said, I'm a comedian. I tell jokes, you know.
And they pay me for it. I did the same thing. I stopped dating, and I just had to look myself in the mirror and say, if I meet the woman that you have planned for me, Lord, am I the guy that she's going to want to marry? And I had to have an honest conversation with myself and say, I don't think so. I'm not there yet. I was a relatively new believer myself. I just started following the Lord, you know, maybe a year or so earlier. And I just spent that time really getting to really developing and building my relationship with the Lord, and working on work on me and work on myself, so that when I did meet that person, and it ended up being Keri, that I was more, I mean, I had a lot of growth still to go through and in maturity. But I think at that point when she met me, her dad said, he's got potential. Like you, Dan, you know, it's like you had potential, even though he was a little sus on your job. It was kind of like, these guys are going to take good care of our daughters.
That's something I often say to young people who are struggling right now in the world to like find somebody, you know, and I'm like, well, you know, have you made a list of what that person looks like? And they're like, oh, that's a great idea. And then I said, and then check yourself and see if they'd like you.
That's great.
And truly start with who you are in Christ, and maybe those rough edges that you have that maybe need to be polished a little bit, or smoothed out a little bit, so that when you do encounter the person God's picked for you, that you're ready, and that not that all the parts of you will be perfect,
right?
Because I think a lot of what God did in marriage is that so much healing happens in who you are within the context of your relationship with your spouse. And so you're not ever going to come to the relationship perfect, right?
Yes.
But potential is important, right? And most importantly for both of us, when we started getting to know each other, which back then there was no texting, there was no emailing. It seems so weird that you talk on the phone.
Exactly.
Yeah, we wrote letters.
We wrote letters to each other. And it was such because I don't think we clarified, but we were apart. We dated, and then I went to Kansas. I went back to Kansas and lived with my parents for a year and worked. And we dated long distance for a period. For really our whole courtship almost was long distance, because once I then moved to California to attend USC for graduate school and to be closer to Erik, every single job he got was not in LA.
Was out of the country.
So even though we lived in the same city, he still wasn't there. And God knew what he was doing. God totally knew what he was doing, because he set us up in our early relationship and getting to know and trust one another, that's how our marriage was going to be too, because the course of his career took him away a lot.
Yeah.
And we had to be so secure in our relationship and our love for one another for that to work for us. And we're coming up on our 25th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And
I know.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Erik, on that note, you were telling me that every 7 years you renew your wedding vows.
But we've carried that tradition on. Yeah. And so we've renewed our vows since we got married in 1995. We've done it 3 times. And the last time we did it was in Scotland, and we invited a bunch of our friends, and they all flew to Scotland, and we all wore kilts and had dressed Downton Abbey, had bagpipers, and we played golf, and it was just a wonderful time. And our parents read to us, and we repeated our vows to each other. And the time before that, our daughters read our vows to us, and we repeated our vows. And then the time before that, we had our siblings do it. And so we love being married and celebrating it, and what it means and how it represents our relationship with the Lord, and that strength. It's cool. And we and it's a good excuse to throw a party and have your friends come and celebrate.
And he proposes to me again each time.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. It's fun, and it's for us.
It's really romantic.
It is, and
it is, and it takes you back to the first things first. We renewed our vows on our 25th wedding anniversary, full on, and to have our children involved. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. The things that they could share and add to it.
One of the best parts, the most meaningful part of it for me, and like what you were saying, having your children there too, is that the first time you say those vows to each other, you kind of have no idea what you're saying. Let's be honest. Some of our vows, we say them and we're like in sickness and health, and in good times and bad times, and in plenty and in want. We say all those things, at 25 years old, and you haven't experienced any of it. So, by the time you're repeating them to each other 21 years later, they take on a whole new level of meaning, where you've been through the loss of, grandparents and job changes and illness and moving and children. Boy, is that a big one. That kind of shifts the playing big time. And just kind of what that says to your marriage, and then really saying to one another that I'm going to keep committing to these vows to you regardless. And it's kind of a celebration that we've made it through a few of them. We're like, wow, we've actually done that together, and I think that's part of the reason why it's so meaningful to us to renew our vows.
So one of the things I wanted to ask too was that So you start your marriage, you start your career, all these different things, and y'all have these aspirations. What kind of conversations did you guys have? Because I mean, you've already explained a bit about it when you're saying you're renewing your vows every 7 years. But for Dan and I remember early on talking about the non-negotiables, things that were just kind of our coat of arms. These are just going to be the hills we died on, and these were important to us, our values.
We started talking about, at the time I was touring like crazy, in those times it was van tours. I'd be gone for 3 weeks. Later it became just flights on weekends, which is wonderful. But, how are we going to have a rhythm to stay plugged into our church, to stay active in our kids' lives, keep our marriage strong, when it's such a crazy industry that we're in. What kind of conversation did you have along those lines?
Well, first of all, when we met and we started dating, Keri talked about sort of the list of things, and on the top of my list, when I was telling Keri and we started talking about marriage, I said the most important thing for me in a partner is that they have a faith in Christ, that they've given their life to the Lord, and that they want to serve Him. And that's because that's most important to me. Because I think underneath that, everything else is blessed. Family, friendships, work, but you got to start there. You need that foundation. So that was, Keri goes, I feel the same way. And so that right away, we got that out. That was, off the table. I mean, on the table, we knew where we stood. And I think then we really had to know that we were, that we trusted each other. And knowing that my career could take me different places, we committed to trying to never be apart longer than 2 weeks. So even if I was across the country or out of the country, I would either fly home, even if it was for a day, or Keri would come and be with me or bring the kids. It was always easier for me to, before we had kids, it was easy for her to come with me and hang out. But as we started children, it got a little harder, and especially once they became involved in school. So we tried to really stick to that commitment. And I think, that was just important.
I think too, we were really blessed for a long period of time. He was working in Los Angeles, and it was what was so great about that is that the studio where he worked was less than 5 minutes from the girls' school. So that when he would have 2 hour breaks or whatever, he could still go volunteer in the classroom, and do that, the Apple Day where they made apple witches. He could go and be the dad that shows up and helps out. And we were so blessed because he was basically doing Crowded Trace during the girls' elementary time. Which, they really needed their daddy to be a part of things, show up for their soccer games and for their school performances. And he was able to do that. And that was so great for us. And I think the girls were really recognized that they were pretty fortunate because a lot of dads didn't get to show up. A lot of us moms were there, but to have a dad show up, it was a lot of fun. So that was super important to us.
And I did the same thing with our kids. I would take him to Price is Right, and I'd put my daughter in the car and have her makeup done like Barker's Beauties, and they'd say a new car, and she'd come out during rehearsal and waving, so it became where they loved what Dad did, as opposed to, ooh, I can't stand what my dad does, he's always gone.
Well, rather than being super enamored with it, I mean, because I think more their friends were than they were, because they're living it. We did things like I can remember CBS was doing the Rose Parade. And so, here I'm taking my kids at the Rose Parade. I remember doing it when I was younger, and it was a trek. And you had to be committed to it.
You camp out 2 days before. And
so here we're showing up 20 minutes before, going to this private little area, sitting in these major bleachers, ordering lattes from the truck behind us that's giving us anything we want. We made sure that afterwards we walked not to our car, the easy route, all through all those people, because I wanted them to see this is what it takes. And all these people, what a gift and a blessing. This is that, your dad gets to do this. And so always kind of navigating that, helping them have appreciative hearts. Because they do get these neat little perks, right?
Well, and also another thing that we agreed upon in our marriage because of what I did for a living. And when you're really immersed in it, you work really hard, you work long hours, is that I purposely took time off. And it was a test of our faith, because a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't want to ever pass on a job because I might never get hired again. But that's where your faith comes in, is that
Yes.
my family needs me this summer. Yeah. And I've just worked 9.5 months, worked my tail off for 9.5 months. I'm going to take a month or two. And look, it's a total privilege to be able to do that, because not everybody can do that. Right. But I was able to, put money aside and keep saving so we could do that and spend that time. Or I would pass on certain things just to say, I really need this time. And it's never perfect, because when I had to move away to Nashville, that was a tough time, because our younger daughter was going into junior high, I think, or just out of
sixth. They were starting and 6th grade and 8th grade.
And no matter how perfect you try to make it, there are still feelings about it. And so while I was very fortunate to be there during their elementary school years and into junior high, I did miss out on some stuff. And trying to navigate that wasn't easy. And I spent a lot of time on airplanes. People actually called me, the airline attendants on Southwest used to call me the mayor of Southwest. So I get on the plane, they go, hey, the mayor of Southwest is here. Because I was a lot in between work. I'd shoot some scenes, run to the airport, fly home for a day or two, fly back, So, but you have to do it to make your family.
There were seasons in our life, the same thing. We just said, this is something we're going to say yes to. We really feel God's doing it. It's going to mean this for us. Like that agreement. It's going to be hard, but this is how we're going to be intentional in it. It's not going to be perfect. And then there was times where, one time you were offered a position that was like 3 times your salary.
Oh yeah. That's when I was working at CBS. I had an offer to go to a higher position actually it's 4 times my salary. Which, wow, that's quite tempting. But I also looked at the effect it would have on my family. And I looked at people who had that role, and they were working 24/7. They were constantly hustling for their next production. Most of them were single or didn't have a real active family life. And my entire time at CBS, I was teaching a 100-person adult Sunday school class on Sunday mornings at our church. And I valued that. And that being coaching my son's Little League team, having a real active family life, going camping, like you're saying, those were much higher values than the money of the job. So I turned it down. I know in our lives, and I think it's true of probably every marriage, God uses marriage and the friction of 2 people trying to live as one more than anything else in life to craft us into his image. I think marriage is the greatest little chiseler that God uses to chip away at the things that don't look like him.
So on that, tell us about how has God used your strengths, each other's strengths, to really shape you?
Talk about what I would say for Keri. I'm going to talk about Keri. Is that one of the things for me is, as an actor, because I travel and I've moved away at times. I lived in Nashville for 3 years. I was in Canada for 6 months. Even up here in Bend, away from Keri for 6 months, I was working. There is this level of trust and support and encouragement from her that I've had from day one. And clearly she says, don't blow it or you're done, so clear. I'm just kidding. But it's I'm half kidding. There's this trust that you have to have. And I've just felt so supported by her that I can go away and focus on my job and know that she's completely supportive and not calling me every, 10 minutes going, where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? There was just this amazing amount of support. And I know, my friends of mine who don't have that support, and it's really hard for them in their careers, because they're like, man, I love being an actor. I love being an artist. I love being what I do. And I feel like I get the chance to meet all these great people and travel, but I've always got someone kind of doubting me and not trusting me. So that's a great strength of Keri's, just that her gift and her gift of faith is extraordinary. And that's also when in the times where I'm struggling and doubting, my career and where it's going, or, any number of things. She has this real deep faith where it's just like, hey, you say you trust God, trust him. And I'm so grateful for that. The times in my life where I wasn't trusting, and she reminded me, hey, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus and stop worrying about all this stuff. So great qualities of her that have helped me in my career, my life.
Go ahead, Keri. What would you say for Erik?
Erik, well, his strengths he's a man of his word. I mean, I think he spoke to that, like the day that we met each other. That was like, your yeses are yes and your no's are no's. And Erik is a man of his word. And he is, when he says he's going to do something or take care of something, he does it. And so there's this level of like trusting that he's going to make sure everything's okay. So I always feel like safe to be myself, safe to be mom, safe to pursue. He will tell you that I have a billion ideas and I throw like 12 or 15 at him and see if any of them are going to stick. Cause I am a big dreamer.
I think she wants to do all of them. I'm like, no.
But generally he's like, okay, that's interesting. Okay. And a lot of times I dream just because I like to dream. Maybe I'll try to pursue one of these fantastical dreams. But for the most part, I feel just so secure that he's like, okay, that if I did really want to do something or try something, I would be like, I'll help you make that happen. Yeah. And so there's just being able to rest in the security that the man I'm with loves me so much that he loves me and he would lay down his life for me. Like, I truly believe that. And I think, so knowing that, it kind of just makes me feel completely free to just be and pursue all that God wants for me. So I think that's the biggest strength is that being a man of his word makes it, because he loves the Lord and he's always trying to please, God and grow in who he's supposed to be. It makes me feel the same way.
Yeah. So what I want to ask you about, and Erik, you and I have talked about this through the years. I really appreciate the challenges of an actor, because a director, a writer, a producer, it's not you up there on that screen. It's not you saying those words, acting those actions, whatever it might be. So, and I know you as an actor get scripts that you just say, this really compromises my faith, my values, or whatever. When you talk about that with Keri, how do you work together on a sounding board with each other of like, do I, don't I, put it in context?
When he looks at material, we try to always, and I think you would agree, we always trying to look for a redeeming quality in a character. Like, is this character? I mean, because it's okay, because in real life, people struggle. Not everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. Not everybody knows the Lord. Not everybody has that moral compass. Who knows? Everybody's background's different. So that's the cool part about being an actor, I think, is that you get to kind of put yourself into the shoes of somebody who's completely different than yourself. And it gives you an amazing perspective. But I think for the most part, as long as your characters have a redeeming, something, either a redeeming quality, or there's justice. Then it's something that he'll look at and pursue.
Yeah, because I feel like if I'm playing a character that does something illegal or bad, whatever that is, or kills somebody or whatever that is, I think whatever in that story, there has to be, like Keri said, there needs to be some sort of consequence or lesson learned. Or and my friend Kim, I don't know if you guys know Kim Dorr, but
very well.
I've counseled with Kim a few times about certain projects, and she just says, Erik, I always try to look for God in every project, in every story. And if there's something in there that you can kind of point back to God, I feel you can find ways to justify to do it. But there are occasionally times where there are things that just check my spirit, and I just go, you know what, I'm not gonna I'm not going to go there. Either whether it's overly gratuitous, unnecessarily gratuitous, I should say, unnecessarily, whether it's in sexual content or violence,
or anything demonic.
And demonic, that's one where I just draw the line. And I've tried to, be open to saying, okay, well, maybe because it's popular and it could be good for my career, that just doesn't work. That's not for me. And I think personally, there's plenty of good stories out there. And I look at the actors that I really respect, guys like Tom Hanks or, even Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Harrison Ford, Meryl Streep. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can look at their body of work and really not find anything overly gratuitous. And they have a level of integrity in their work and the stories that they tell. And I'm a big fan, as you know, of Clint Eastwood. I've been fortunate to work with him. And I find that he tells these amazing stories with really difficult subjects. And he finds a way to do it with class. I always go back to this great scene in American Sniper where Sienna Miller's character, who plays Taya Kyle, she's waiting for Chris to come home from war, and he's starting to have PTSD, and they're missing, they're not connecting, and she comes out dressed in this beautiful like lingerie and just wants to be with him, and he stands up and picks her up and walks away from camera, and the door closes, and that's all you see. That's all you need to see. And love story between these two that love each other and are dealing with really difficult issues, mental illness and all, et cetera, the tragedy of war. And Clint just did such a classy job of that. Like Keri said, a lot of these characters that we play, it's not me. It's not a person of faith, and they're still they're on their journey. Yeah. And I want to tell that story of that person's journey.
Exactly. Yes. And that's the power of story. Stories done well invite us into the world of the other. They take us to places, experiences, people that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And the church, the Bible's filled with bad behavior. But what's so wonderful, and you tapped on this, is there's God's redemption thread through the entire, from Genesis to Revelations.
Look at almost every character in the Bible other than Jesus was flawed. Every character.
Yeah.
Very flawed.
Yeah, big time. And, and God, present company included.
God cashed in on those flaws and used them for his glory.
Yeah. Good way to put it.
That's where our hope is, because man, if he was looking for all the perfect parts of me to use, he'd be looking for.
Yes.
But if he wants to find a flaw and use that for his glory, that wouldn't take very long. So I think that's the piece that's so beautiful about storytelling is that we can identify a lot.
Yes.
More we identify more with characters and their flaws than characters and their successes, I think.
Exactly. And if they don't have any flaws, they don't resonate with us because, we're all messed up. We're all broken people. And if it's somebody who's perfect, it's like, nah, that's not my experience. We got to ask you about the, Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch?
Yes.
Tell us about that, what you're doing.
It's an equine rescue ranch. So they, when they first started out, it was all rescue horses. People would call about a horse that they could see was being neglected or abused. They would often be donated horses when people go on hard times or whatnot, or people would buy a horse knowing that it was in a bad situation and then donate it to the ranch for rehabilitation. So there's been a lot of horses that have come through here that have found a safe place to land, to be rehabilitated, to be taught how to trust humans again. And it's the same thing for children. So a lot of kids that have been hurt by other people who are going through hard times and neglect, abuse, maybe a parent with cancer or a loss in the family, kids in foster care, kids at risk, will come to the ranch and they get to spend time with an adult who it's all about them, and they get to just come be a kid, and they just get loved on by a grown up.
We see about 6,500 families a year come through the gates.
My
Wow.
goodness. Wow.
Yeah. So
Any special needs families? My grandson special needs. And let me tell you, being around a horse just soothes his spirit. It's just beautiful to watch.
across the board, we've had paraplegics, quadriplegics come out. We have blind,
We have children with
autism, Down.
Yes.
And it's a blast. I mean, in the summertime, and I'm really hoping that the world opens up pretty soon, because one of the best parts about living next door is hearing laughter literally all day long. They play, I mean, they'll ride horses, but then they have water balloon fights, and then they paint the horses, and then they give the horses each other, and it's just a ball over there, and it's such a joy.
Yeah, and that's why we haven't given, why we care so deeply about this story, and why we feel like it's God called us to put this on film, and so if it's His will, it'll happen, and we're just trying. So
we're excited.
But at the end of the day, He's already used this ranch to reach the world for the gospel, and so whether the movie gets made or not, I mean, it's our, but really more importantly, the message is out there, and we're just getting a chance to love.
Erik, would you be directing, because you've been really turning the corner and doing a lot more directing these days?
Yeah, that's the plan. I plan to direct. Keri wrote the script. We have a producer that's working with us, the guy that I met directing the Hallmark movies. You talked about me directing.
Yeah.
So I've been really fortunate. Hallmark called me a year and a half ago or 2 years ago and asked me to direct a Christmas movie that ended up doing really well. And
Yes.
They called me back. Okay.
One last question.
Sure. Let's keep going.
This is the best. I am telling you.
One last question. Can we talk for 3 more hours?
Yeah.
Well, definitely, if there's a season 2, you guys are on it.
And I'm telling you, we're coming to visit you. I mean, you said
Susan,
we need.
we're coming to Bend. But if you could get in a time machine and go back to your younger selves, what advice would you give your younger self, either about career, family, personal, whatever it might be? What would you tell them?
Well, I would, if I could go back and talk to my younger self, I would say, be nicer to your parents and listen to them, because they're actually pretty smart. And I would also say, don't worry so much. Don't be so doubtful about things, and just trust. You really, I just say it's going to be okay. You just got to trust. Don't try to control things so much. And that would have been something I would have, told myself. Just trust.
Yeah, I love it.
I agree.
Love it.
You're in trust.
Yeah. What about you, Keri?
Well, it's a tough one. I think if I had to go back and talk to my younger self, it would probably be, you need to just, it's similar, like trust that, be who you are. That's the other thing. It took me a little bit longer to kind of really show my authentic self to everybody. I selected just a few people. So I was pretty good at putting on this, I'm okay and everything's good and whatever kind of thing. And by doing that, I attracted people into my life that weren't really good for me. And I found that would really be my true authentic self, and not be afraid, knowing that the Lord would bring people who love me for me, regardless, the good, the bad, and the ugly is what I like to say.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to get there. So I had to go through some more tumultuous times with friendships as an adult.
Yes.
But I think that's what I would say. I was like, you know what? You're okay who you are. And if you just be who you are, you're going to attract all the right people into your life. So I think that's what I would say to myself.
I agree. And I would say on that note, I would also tell my young self, don't worry so much about what other people think of you, and meaning, I think I've always tried to be kind for the most part, but I think there are times when I hide behind that kindness instead of, maybe being willing to be courageous to speak up in a situation where I should, or say no to something that I, maybe an opportunity, a job or something, or just be willing to know that it's okay sometimes to have some conflict and not worry about that you're going to suddenly lose a friend or lose respect from some.
Yes.
So I would advise, I would also give that advice. It's like, don't be so concerned about what everybody thinks about you.
Yeah.
Yes. There is a freedom.
Yes.
There is a freedom that I have felt in just that as I've gotten older.
Yes.
Because there was a time I was good at taking the temperature of the room and helping to normalize and and that could be looked at such a great trait. But in a way, you're not your real authentic self. You're just really this diffuser, this peacemaker. Yes, it's part of my character. But to be okay with those pregnant pauses, I don't need to fill the space.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't need to fill the space.
Yeah.
There's actually something I've learned in just being quiet and listening. Actually, you get to hear the on-ramps of God.
Yeah.
Because you're just not filling it all in there. And and that rest and trust in who he's made you to be.
Yeah. Of course, I'm much more superficial. So if I was talking to my younger self, I'd say, this is the best you're going to look.
I don't think so.
It's all downhill. You're just going to get older. So, well, you love me, Ed. So, well, we love you guys.
Yeah.
And we so admire, yes, your careers, but more your hearts, your commitment to the Lord, your love for other people, your love for your family. Yeah. We just love you guys.
Yeah.
And as Peggy said earlier, we just can't wait to dine with you.
Yes.
To break bread with you and see you guys and give you a big old hug without a mask.
We look forward to that big time.
Yeah.
Bless you guys.
Bless you.
We love you.
Thank you so much.
Love you.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for Life Off Screen with Dan and Peggy Ruppel. Life Off Screen is produced by Master Media International. Our technical director is Jason Rugg. Please subscribe to the Life Off Screen YouTube channel or subscribe to the Life Off Screen podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave your comments in the comment section, and to find out more about Master Media, go to mastermedia.com. Thanks again for joining us. Hope to see you next time.